Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting of October 25th, 2022 to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Cavallari, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, I'm not sure, am I doing roll call next or am I amending the agenda next?
Roll call.
Roll call, okay. So now we're going to do roll call, please.
Mayor Holtzclaw, Mayor Pro Tem Benel,
Here.
Councilmember Cavallari,
Here.
Councilmember Steckler, Councilmember Allison,
Here.
Councilmember Takei,
Here.
Councilmember Paddock.
Present.
We know that the mayor is on vacation and Councilmember Cavallari, Councilmember Steckler reached out to the mayor, and let him know that he was feeling under the weather this evening. So do I have a motion to excuse both of them?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The ayes have it. Now I would like to, I need to entertain a motion to amend the agenda. Staff requests that we are going to pull item 7B for the Parks and Recreation Board appointments because someone was not able to make their appointments. So we will do that on another day. And also there is no need at this time for the executive session, which is 11A. So can I entertain a motion to amend the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have it. The agenda is amended. Next up, we have audience communication. Is anyone in the audience here or online that would like to speak today? Oh, Will says he can't hear.
Hi, this is Joe. I believe it's on Will's end. He needs to check his settings. I don't know how we communicate that with him if he can't hear us.
Okay, I don't know either. Is there a way to find him in a chat somewhere that you guys have access to or something?
We have chat disabled in this meeting.
Okay.
It's working. I'll just give a thumbs up. It's on you. It's okay. It's on you. It's on your side, Will.
Okay,
I'm muted as well. I could try and see if I have an email to email him.
then, okay.
So I'll try that. If not, we can try again. Maybe it's towards the end.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Asa. And then maybe we can circle back to Will at the end. Is there anyone else online that would like to speak? Or anyone in the audience? All right. No one would like to speak, so we are moving on to the public hearing. And I have a script. What? I don't have a presentation on here. I think we have two different agendas. Councilmember Cavallari is looking at a different agenda that had a presentation from the chief on there. I'm assuming. I don't have that in mind, so just
Said
making
corporal
sure.
appointments. Did
That
that get
item was
changed?
moved to November 1st.
Oh, all right. My apologies.
A prior agenda.
Okay, perfect. Okay, now we are going to move on to the public meeting. Tonight, the city council will hold a public hearing on the 2023-2024 revenue sources and will review the preliminary 2023-2024 budget. The hearings are required by statute. Public notice of the hearing was published on October 15th, 2022. The process that we will use tonight will be as follows. First, I will ask for a motion to open the public hearing on the 2023-2024 revenue sources and preliminary budget review. If there is a second, and an affirmative vote, we then will receive a staff report from Deputy City Manager / Finance Director Laurel Brock regarding the revenue sources and preliminary 2023-2024 budget. Next, we will hear the public's testimony on the revenue sources and preliminary 2023-2024 budget. Please limit your testimony to 3 minutes. Once all the members of the public in person and online have had a chance to testify, I will ask for a motion to close the public hearing. Next, council will engage in discussion and propose changes, if any, that council would like to have made in the budget so that staff has direction for preparing the property tax ordinance for adoption. We are not being asked to adopt a property tax or budget ordinance tonight. So with that, do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have it. We've opened the public hearing.
All right.
Deputy City Manager?
Okay, so initially we are going to just start with revenue sources and go over the different property tax options. And then from there, we're gonna look at the current property tax scenario, what's happening, EMS is going away, and our recommendations on where we think we need to be landing. And then from that, we will step into the 23-24 preliminary budget review. And then I will open it for public comment. All right, so today we have the public hearing on revenue sources, and then we'll also be reviewing the 23-24 budget. From there, we will take any kind of adjustments that are requested and put together a proposed budget. And then I will present that on November 1st. So from there, we will also go ahead and approve the property tax levy on the 1st. If we need, we can push that until the 8th. We just have to have it into the county by November 30th. The other piece that you'll be handling on the 1st is the CIP public hearing. And then on the 8th, we'll look at the final budget. So on the 1st, we'll look at the proposed budget and you guys will say yay or nay. And then we'll have our final budget on the 8th. We'll do a public hearing. We'll take public comment, and then I will send that off to the auditors and AWC. And if we need, we do have up to the end of December for that budget adoption. It's just nice to get it out of the way with the holidays. All right, so I wanted to start with an explanation on the property tax levies, because I know that when I first started here, it was more confusing than other property tax situations I had dealt with. So the property tax levy, you have an absolute dollar amount that you can levy, no matter whether your assessed value goes up or down. So for 2023, our assessed value is going to be going up roughly 34.96%. So a house that was worth $500,000 in 2022 is potentially worth $672,800 in 23. So a lot of people are like, oh, well, do I have to pay taxes on, you know, the 672,800? We have an absolute dollar amount. So we collected $6.5 million last year, and then we can only take another $65,000, no matter what the assessed value situation is. So from there, we do state property tax rates in terms of dollars per thousand. So we have $1.29. We say we have a property tax levy of $1.29 for every $1,000 for 2022. So if you want to take your house property and take it, divide it by 1,000, that'll drop. So you have a $500,000 house. You take that 1,000, drop it to 500, take that times your levy rate, and then that's how you're going to get your taxable amount. So I just want to make sure everyone understands property taxes are not increasing based on the increasing value of property, but the total property tax that was assessed in the prior year. And then we can't go over 1% of our highest lawful levy. And so this is going to be a little bit more complicated for a lot of people to understand with the situation we are in, having paid the fire contract from this levy. So our highest lawful levy will stay where it was at. So at that $6.5 million, we're just going to bank that capacity and we're going to go ahead and assess a lower amount. So we'll get into that here shortly. So the three things you need to know about property taxes is a levy amount, an assessed value, and a levy rate. So we have the levy rate, so it's per $1,000 or 1,000 of your assessed value. And that is your levy amount divided by your city's total assessed value. And then we had expressed the levy rate in terms of a dollar rate per $1,000. So a rate of 0.00025 is expressed as 25 cents per $1,000. All right, so what happens if we don't need the full 1% increase? So right now we don't need that full 1% because we're not actually going to be levying the same amount we did last year. So we're going to be almost, I think it was $2.5 million lower. So at that point in time, our highest lawful levy is just going to camp out where it was at until we reach that amount at some point in time in the future. We do have over 10,000 people, so we may only increase our levy rate by 1% or by the implicit price deflator, whichever is less. So right now we're at 6.457%. So this is in relation to inflation and everything that's happening. We don't have to worry about this, but we did in previous years. I believe it was the first year I came, we could only increase the levy by, it was like 0.6%. Instead of the 1%, otherwise you have to have a second ordinance. So historically, a 1% increase would have gotten us an additional $66,641.60. And then we also would have had an EMS levy, but in our current situation, that is not what is happening. So we did join the South County Fire RFA in April of 2020. Or I'm sorry, of 2022. So our annual fire contract was $4.3 million. We had 1.8 that the EMS levy was covering. So this is the levy that's expiring at the end of this year. It's going away. We won't be seeing this anymore. And then we had $2.5 million coming out of our general fund. So we had that regular property tax levy that was covering that second half of that contract. So again, EMS levy is expiring. We're not going to be looking at that this year. We collected 6.6 million for 2022 for property taxes. 2.6 was removed. And then I will note, we did add back that 178,000. That's going to be the fire station and then the cost of a fire marshal. And then in 2023, we are currently estimating property taxes at $4.2 million. And I have added the new construction. So when they have people that build new buildings, we get to pull that revenue in that next year. And then so this is where it's going to be slightly confusing for people that are not super familiar with the way our property taxes work. Our 1% is not a true 1%. I am only doing it based on that $4.2 million. So this is an arbitrary 1%. This is just the most fair way to go about doing this for the taxpayer. And so we're counting that 1% as $41,779. All right, so I think it's a lot easier to have an example where you can see what's happening. So in this top picture, we have assessed value of $100,000. So remember, your assessed value, that is not what your taxes go up and down by. So in the first one, you've got 100,000, you've got it split equally between these two houses. So our levy rate is $2 per thousand. So that's going to get us $200 divided by the 100,000. So that 100,000 is the assessed value. That $200 is the levy that we're saying we need. And so that levy then translates to a levy rate of $2 per thousand. And so that will get you a $50,000. For the $50,000, it's going to be a property tax of $100 per house. So in the second year, your assessed value is going to double. So the assessed value, I'll make sure you are seeing the house with the orange is now 150,000. So their assessed value went up. And then the house in red stayed the same. So we have that combined assessed value of 200,000 now. We have a 1% increase. So we asked for $200. So now we'll be asking for 202. But we're going to divide that by the 200,000 because that's what your total assessed value is. So that's going to give you a levy rate of $1.01 per house. So I just want to make sure that makes sense to everyone. So from here, you're going to have property taxes. You're going to take the 150,000. And that's going to get you a property tax of 151.50. And then it's just going to be that $50.50. So it's just redistributing. The assessed value redistributes based on your house's value. But we still have that same amount that's a cap. So that 200 goes to 202, and then that's how you get your levy rate. All right, so in 2022, so this year we had assessed value of about $5 million. And then our levy, or I'm sorry, that is not 5 million. 5 billion. I think I did that last year too. Then we have our regular levy that was 6.5, almost $6.6 million. So that gets us a tax rate per thousand of 1.28, $1.28. So that's going to be a house that's $500,000. You're going to be paying $644.50. So over the last year, a lot has happened. We've had some new construction, we've had reevaluation, and the assessed value went up 34.56%. So that is a lot. So right now we're dealing with the reassessment of properties, and then we're also going to be taking and including that fire decrease, and that's around 35% also. So this is what's going to really start confusing people. So we went from $1.28 and we're going to be going to under $1. So our preliminary assessed value went from $5 million to 6.8, almost 6.9. Okay, so there's a lot here. So at $6.8 million, you have a 1% levy increase. This is the artificial 1%. So we'll be adding that 41,779. We have a 1% increase less the fire amount. And that is going to give us that 4,245,997 number. So that is the taxable amount we are looking for, or I'm sorry, the tax amount we're looking for. Your tax rate per $1,000 is now going to be 62 cents from $1.28, $1.29-ish. So your estimated home value at 500,000 was originally, you would be paying about $644.50. And currently, if we stick to the current property tax scenario that we're looking at, your property taxes will go down to $416.73. And that is including the increase in your assessed value. So you're going from a house that was 500,000 to a house that's worth $672,800. So I did the math down here. We've got the 2022 tax rate per thousand was at 1.28, 1.29. So we have 500,000. We're going to divide that by 1,000. So that's going to get us that $500 or essentially, times the 1.29, and that's how you get the property tax amount. And it's the exact same thing. It's just that your house's value has changed. And then let's say I have a pointer. So your house's value has changed, and then your rate has changed. So, all right, so again, we are not doing the full 1%. That was around 65,000. This is going to be on the artificially capped amount. And if we had gone with our highest lawful levy, we could have done our 6.5, 6.6 plus 66,642, but we're not going to be doing that. Okay, so from here, I just wanted to make sure everyone had at least some kind of a clue as to when you spend $1, what is that tax, where is that going? And so out of every $1 in tax you spend or you pay, 18 cents is going to be the cities, 30 cents is going to be the states, and then the school district is 37, so on and so forth. All right, so we're going to move into the property tax scenario that we're looking at right now. So for our based on 2022 assessed value for the 2023 year property tax collections, we have the highest lawful levy at 6.6. We have the previous year's levy amount at 6.5 million. So with the new construction, we're adding 26,322. We don't have any refunds. So at this point in time, we're looking at a levy amount of 4.2 million. So that's going to be the 2022 levy less that fire cost. And then I'm adding that construction back in. So the total dollar decrease over the previous year is $2.3 million. So I think someone would be like, hey, I thought you said that the fire contract was 2.5 million. Just remember, we have construction and we're adding back the fire marshal service and that payment for the fire station that we're going to be doing annually. So again, 35% decrease over last year. And I will note that if we were we could take our banked capacity. So we currently have banked capacity of $97,267.82. And that's going to get buried after this year, where we're going to be taking and banking that 2.3. All right. Do we have any questions on that? Because I feel like that was a lot before I jump into budget.
Yeah, could you just briefly explain the bank capacity?
Yes, okay. So bank capacity, so the county, the most you've ever levied since 1985, that is going to be your highest lawful levy. So from there, anything under that you take goes and sits in a bank account. Basically, the county holds it and says, hey, you don't have to go to the voters if you need additional funding because you did not take a 1% increase in previous years. So our highest lawful levy, anytime, say we were at the 6.6 million and we increased it by 1%, that will be creating a new highest lawful levy. So then that next year, if you say, oh, I don't think I need quite as much as I had last year, I think we're going to collect roughly 200,000 under the highest amount we've ever collected. That's going to be your banked capacity. And I think it's really important to understand that bank capacity does not sit there and then say last year and the year before, we don't get to add each year together and it doesn't grow. So that highest amount is absolute. It does not change. So say, let's bring it down to like $600. Say $600 is the most that you have ever collected. And you decide, I'm going to take $500 this year. So it's $100 that would go into your banked capacity. So the next year, you can either pull that 100 or let it sit. So if you bump it back to 600,000 or 600, your banked capacity is going to go away because you're back up to that lid. So think of it as that top tier, you can go up to that amount, and anytime you don't quite get there, you can pull that in and add it to your next tax for property tax. Does that make sense? Okay,
I'm sorry, we're having trouble hearing.
any other questions? I know that I had a really hard time with banked capacity because I was working with the county my first year, and I was like, I swear we had it, it's gone now. So yes, just imagine the top of a mountain, you can't go past that. Other than 1%. And so the most you've ever levied, if you levy under that, you can go ahead and make up for that the next year and add that to your maximum amount. Okay, any additional questions before? Yep.
Yeah, so that bank capacity, you said it doesn't compound. So
Yes.
let's say you're 2 years out and you still don't need to, or yeah, you just have the bank capacity from the year before.
Mhm.
Okay, so it just stays there until you need it.
Right.
Okay, without needing
So
an additional levy.
600 is the max. Whatever the difference is between what you're levying and that $600 figure, that's going to be your banked capacity.
Okay, and if it goes up or down, like the second year out, then it would be whatever that amount is, that becomes the banked amount.
Right, so if we had $100 banked capacity and our highest lawful levy was $600, we could in theory go 606 would be that 1%. And then you can pull that banked capacity and get you up another $100 to $706. But then that's going to make your highest lawful levy go up for your next year. Did that just,
And then theoretically, the next year, there's another possible percentage point increase.
right,
Gotcha. Thank you.
off of that new highest lawful levy? Because in theory, you're losing your taxing power if you're not collecting that additional 1%. Each year, yes. Okay,
Are we ready to move on to public comment, or did you have more to go
I
over?
think we'll run through budget really fast. Fast is relative. And then we'll go into the public comment just in case anyone has anything on that as well. All right, so before we really jump in, there are possible adjustments that can be made. We had talked to a few council members, and so they had asked, where can we cut? Is there something that ARPA can cover? So really the easiest way to start getting room in our budget for potential additional staff would be that comprehensive plan that happens every 10 years. So this is a really big chunk of money that doesn't happen very often, but we've got to do the comp plan, so it has to be in the budget. So ARPA would be a very nice relief there, and that would allow us to spend that money elsewhere if we wanted to. We also had the legislative lobbyist brought up. That is completely up to council. I'm not going to say one way or the other. But if we were to remove both of those, that would give us 494,000. And at this point in time, the city manager and I have looked at the additional staff requests, and we are recommending the change from an associate planner to a planner, an additional engineer, and a City Hall North administrative assistant. So right now, our economic development people are really drowning. And as someone who has been in their shoes, I understand. And I will say, following very close to these positions was the deputy police chief. So I just want to make sure that is on everyone's radar. If we wanted, we could take that 97,000 in banked capacity. If we didn't want to do all of the comprehensive plan, or it really just depends on where council is sitting and what they want done with this budget. So those are just some options. I will say it's roughly $7 additionally each year or for this next year for that $97,000 for a taxpayer with a house property at 500,000. Okay, so I just wanted to start with general fund. So we do have to go out 5 years. Split this all the way. I went back to 2021 just so that we could see the different, the last biennium and we were where exactly we were going to be landing. So you can see in 2023, this is going to be where that EMS levy drops off. So that's going to be a substantial decrease to our revenues, and our expenses are going to go down as well because we're not covering the cost for that fire contract. And then we just have estimated where exactly we're going to be landing on the different revenues and expenses. And I will note that if we continue even at 2% each year, we will end up negative in 2027. Obviously, not obviously, but we are sure that we can adjust things, revenues. We're going to be looking at all of our different options. So things are not going to stay the same. We will be moving forward as we move into these next years. I do want to note on sales tax, I did budget below 2022. It was about 2.5%. And then I think it was 3.2% in 2024 below where we were estimating for 2022. We did have the farm sales tax that was still supposed to be partially coming in 2022. So between that and the recession, I just wanted to give us a little bit of padding. So these numbers could go up. I just don't know what's going to be happening, and it's better to be safe than sorry. And also, I did not include any ARPA revenues or expenses in this budget. All right, so revenues. Overall, we have taxes, licenses, and permits, intergovernmental. You can see the passports really ramping up in 2023. We're moving to almost 700,000, hopefully. And then we're gonna hopefully charge forward after that. So we will see how that works out. Recreation, we are doubling down, trying to bring those numbers back up. Same thing with the different, honestly, all across the board, it's going to be coming in and trying to make up. We really did bring a lot less in revenue. COVID really did have an impact on the different charges for services, different licenses, the different fines, and we had less officers out. I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but it seems like everywhere I go, I do see a lot more people pulled over, and I'm not talking about just in Mill Creek. So I think we've got a lot more police out now that everyone is starting to move back to normal. Does anyone have questions on revenues that are burning? All right, so expenses, this is very close to what you've had given to you. I just wanted to set this out so that you have 21 through 28 so that you can see where exactly how these have changed, where we see them growing. So again, your expenses in 2022, 15.8, they dropped to 11.5. So that's going to be the biggest piece is going to be that fire. And I will say at this point in time, we are projected to, I feel like I'm jinxing myself, but we're projected to come in 400,000 under budget for the 21-22 budget, which will be nice for our reserves. Okay, so I got a little creative and no, you're not gonna be able to see it. So streets funds overall, we've got motor vehicle tax, multimodal transportation, permits, those bring in revenue, and then any kind of grants. So I just projected out for the 5 years. I went ahead and gave you 21 and 22 for reference on where we are. So you can see total revenues are not increasing greatly. we'll see how our licensing and permits move in the future. That this may be one area where they do increase more. I just didn't want to put that out there yet. I will say on this one, you will see 2022. You can see the transfer in. These are going to be from the general fund. So right now, the streets fund is struggling to bring in enough revenue to cover expenses. And so general fund is essentially propping this fund up. And so to keep it from going negative, I did need to supplement the income. So these are not something, they've done it a few times in the past, but it would be beneficial if we could figure out a way to not have to use general fund revenues to support streets. And we're working on that. We'll be bringing a plan later. So same thing, expenses you can see were quite a bit more in 2022. We also did have some capital outlay that was purchased. So that was a big chunk. We had the professional services go up in 2022 because we did start having the contractor come in and plow the streets. I would say I am hoping that that cost will go down since we do have our new trucks and snow plows.
Hey,
So-
Laurel, I know when you talked about streets and having to prop up the fund balance a little bit, I know we talked a bit about our permit fees and schedules and talking about doing a review of what we're charging, making sure that we're at current levels and current trends. So I'm sure that's part of the discussion.
Yes,
Oh, okay, thank you.
yes, that will be very beneficial.
Laurel, I have a question.
Yes.
Just to refresh my memory, what all makes up the revenue currently in the street fund? Where does it all come from?
So when you have multimodal and motor vehicle tax. So when you purchase gas, and then the state gives us a percentage of the sales, that's going to be one. And then we also, I mean, we've got, it's based on sales, got gas, but then we also have the permits and any kind of grant funding. I know we had the TIB funding. I will say we had a larger hit in the streets fund because we did have a TIB project that had got started. They spent a lot of money and then it sounds like the direction changed. And so they had to complete the project. They had to pivot, complete the project to be able to get additional TIB money. So we may be getting more grant funding in the future, but we did have to finish that project and it wasn't cheap. So I think it was a crosswalk maybe. Yeah, okay. So that is an additional change that in the future, I think the streets fund, we can move forward stronger.
Oh.
Yep.
For grants, what staff is needed to be able to determine, to be looking and be proactive in looking for grants and opportunities for that? Or who's
So-
responsible for that?
I know Frank knows a lot about the different options available and he has really been keeping his eye open. You can see a lot of changes in our CIP that we have not previously done, and that is specifically so that we can get additional grant funding. So we're splitting, the motorized versus non-motorized. We're shaping the CIP process for those different grants. I know we have quite a few that we have our eyes on, but we do have to remember that we have to have staff to be able to do the projects. And if we don't have the staff to do the projects, we're just going to lose money. And then we're not going to be able to get additional grants because we may have other jurisdictions that say, hey, we gave you the money and then you didn't spend it. And why would we give it to you again? Are you going to do the same thing? So we're just trying to be, we're working on getting staffed, and then that will be a top priority.
Fantastic. That was my second, my follow-up question when it came to that. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. I went wrong direction. Here we go. All right, so ARPA, I did go ahead and just split the remaining amount between 23 and 24. I will remind everyone, really the difference between 23 and 24, it's a biennial budget. So we're not restricted to that single amount. So really the full amount is available. We have only paid the retentions out of ARPA. We did do the retrofit in here that I will likely be recommending, and we'll need to get a journal entry done to move that. And then we have just a list of projects, requests, and different funding needs that we'll be bringing before the end of the year. So just as a reminder, we have until December 31st of 2024 to have the funding allocated, and then it has to be out of our bank account by 2026. So we have some time. So then we have municipal arts. So I have gone ahead and budgeted 10,000 for 23 and 24. I did estimate fairly high on that 1%. It really just depends on what kind of capital projects we get done, on what kind of funding comes into this account. We should be fine for 23 and 24, but 25 on can be impacted because you only have so much in your fund balance. And if you don't have funds coming into this arts fund, if you don't have funding coming into the fund, you cannot spend money from it. So I know I'd had a council member tell me that we had always had $10,000 budgeted annually. That's only if the money is there, and really at this point in time, we don't have a ton that's been coming in. All right, so council contingency, this was made just to help with any kind of an emergency or an unanticipated need. So this is not, this fund does not have any active revenue coming in other than just a little bit of interest. So that's what these amounts are across the top in revenue. And then I do believe we have the utility box project that'll be hitting this year. So that will be, I did go ahead and throw in that municipal arts went $202 over budget. So I put that in here. That doesn't have to stay there. We can move it. We can do budget amendment if we need. But I wanted to get it in here just for everyone's, so that everyone could see it. And I went ahead and budgeted 10,000 each year for 23 and 24, just in case you guys needed it. All right, paths and trails. So this is going to be the same thing, motor vehicle fuel tax. So a percentage of that motor vehicle fuel tax that's going to the streets fund has to be pulled into this fund to maintain, update different paths, trails, that kind of thing. So revenues really, it's going to be the motor vehicle fuel tax and interest. And then we don't necessarily have any specific project right now, but I did go ahead and budget 5,000 each year in case we had something come up. Okay, drug buy fund, we typically have our investigation supplies coming out of this fund. So anytime we have a drug-related confiscation, and then something is sold, it can come into this fund and support the investigation supplies for the police department. So we have not had much revenue for a very long time, which is okay. And we do have funding allocated in case they need additional supplies in the next few years. And I will note that by 2027, they will have to use general fund for some of the different supplies and costs if nothing else comes in, which is okay. Yes.
Sorry, so that was my question about coming in. So you mean the revenue of it being?
Say there was a car
Mhm.
or something. if that was sold, that could come in here. I don't know that a car is a great example.
Yeah.
But anything that is sold, that revenue then has to come into this fund
I got you. And so, but we haven't had revenue
in a very
for
long time.
it, but we have had expenses.
Yes. And I think we have a couple items we may have to be getting rid of potentially in the next year or two from just speaking with chief. I don't think it's gonna be a whole lot, but it just helps with the different investigation supplies and costs.
Thank you.
All right, so City Hall North, the main revenue source here is just going to be those leases. So we have leases and we also do have the recreation held there, but that revenue typically is going to go back into the general fund. So we use this building to benefit the general fund and this specific fund. So this fund is doing very well. Lease revenue we have 2 tenants currently, but we are using quite a bit of the space for the recreation. We're looking at some other potential uses, more on that to follow. And then expenses are just the upkeep of the building and part of the salaries of some of the maintenance workers are in this fund.
And Laurel, just like for the streets fund, how we're going to reevaluate the monies we're collecting for permits and other fees. We're going to do that the same for rents and leases that we currently hold, correct?
Yes, we actually are in the process of re-upping a couple contracts. So those will be adjusted. And I have figured those increases in. Yes.
So I think I know the answer, but for the updates that are needed, that comes from the CIP? No.
So it will, so depending on what happens, there are a lot of balls in the air right now, because it could be grant funding, it could be ARPA. It really just depends on what we end up doing.
But for this, the way I'm looking at it, how you have it laid out, it's not from
Yes.
here.
So
It's the
any-
assertion it's from somewhere else.
yes, so any kind of capital project
Mhm.
that is over $25,000
Mhm.
and will last at least 5 years, that will go into that capital
Right.
316 fund or 317, 318 parks,
Right.
roads, depending on what it is.
Yeah.
I will say this specific fund does do transfers. So say, so like for instance, for 2022, we had budgeted 160,000 in this last biennium to transfer over to that 316 fund
Mhm.
so that we could then purchase HVACs
Mhm.
for City Hall North.
Mhm.
So those are one of the ways we pay for it out of the fund, but you won't see that large expense in there. It's just going to be a
Nice.
transfer.
Thank you.
All right, so debt service fund, we only have one GO bond. And so surface water transfers funding for the principal and interest into the debt service fund. And this is where we pay for that bond. And the current bond, I'm sorry, is for the surface water infrastructure program. We took out 3.3 million to get those different pipes replaced. I believe we have the grade C and grade F projects that you'll see in the CIP and in that 316 fund. Or not, I'm sorry, not the 316, the 401 in surface water. Okay, so local revitalization fund, this is a percentage of property taxes. We did have to take a bond out to complete we had to take bond funding out and potentially put a new tax in place by this year. And they had been saying that it should have gotten put in place around 2016. So this is funding that I am still working with the state to figure out what exactly is happening with this. I believe it was tied to a sub-area study or sub-area, it was something that didn't end up happening. It sounded like there was not agreement with council.
You want to take a shot at that?
Yeah.
Okay, so this goes way back when we first did eGov. We had a Public
eGov.
Works Trust Fund loan. And this LRF funding was going to pay that loan back. That loan was gonna be like $8 million to do the spine roads. This goes way, way, way back. We were able to get this, it was kind of an experimental program by the state, this LRF funding. We got that money. But what Laurel's saying is we would have had to go and borrow a bunch of money and have bond payments to pay it back to apply this funding. What the state did is we increased the value, the local revitalization, we increased the value at eGov by up zoning, and all kinds of stuff got built there. They let us keep part of that property tax and part of the sales tax. That's the money that went in. But the condition was we had to spend it on some capital improvement that went there. And so by not doing that spine road, we aren't able to continue collecting this money. Overall, that spine road, remember, just got more and more complicated, more and more expensive, and it just didn't make sense. So we kind of just let that go away collectively. And unfortunately, we can't collect this money anymore. So I think what Laurel's talking about is we've got that much, what is it, a couple $100,000 in the fund, but we have to do something with it. And what we do with it, I think, is still the question you're trying to answer. Isn't that right?
Yes. And I will say this split, the disbursement between 23 and 24, it is actually just that $266,948 that will be going away by the end of 2024. And I will say I had talked to the last city manager about this, and it just wasn't a great time for us to be moving forward with taking a ton of debt on, because we were in the middle of COVID. We would have had to go to like Moody's and get a rating. It just wasn't reasonable to just like do a tail end sprint on this specific project. And that's if we could get a project that all of council agreed on that still fit what we had told the state we were going to be doing.
You remember in the big picture, the good news is that the development on the east end, they put in their own roads. And the development on the west end called the farms, they put in their own roads. And so it became the piece in the middle. What got difficult was it wasn't just the road itself is what people were thinking in the first place. It's what you do with the stormwater. And it got really complicated because the water doesn't want to flow uphill. And so it's a very complicated thing that Frank and Angela and I have talked a little bit about it, but it just didn't make sense to put in a bunch of money towards a very small connection. So you may remember Frank talked about that of not being a spine road, but doing a study to look at some sort of multimodal kind of connection. So is it a pathway that takes bikes and people that connects those things instead of trying to be a full-on road? Because if you can reduce the width of that, then you don't have to have as much stormwater facilities, because it was huge vaults, huge stormwater issues that made it very, very expensive. So one of those things that I don't think we as a city thought about that in the first place. The good news is we did get a lot of those roads built by the developers. That's the great part. But it turns out it was a very expensive proposition all the way along to have that spine road done.
So that's actually what I was going to ask was about Frank's and I don't want to say it's Frank's idea. I'm sure it's a team, or it could just be Frank's idea about making an alternative. So we couldn't use that though for this. Is that your
I don't think so. I think the time is clicking
Okay.
is what she's saying. I
Right,
think
and
we gotta
I-
do something with it.
I don't think we would want to take
That
the
amount of debt.
bonding
Right.
that would be needed.
that's why we're okay with that aspect.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. And then when we're talking about the connection, we are talking about from the farm to Buffalo Park. That section, it's still the other element that was Buffalo Park to Seattle Hill Road. That was never part, I mean, there's a huge sign for it and neighbors still talk to me about it. Assuming that something's still gonna be built there, but as of now, there's not for anything of specifically that, not even the multimodal, that's not even part of the discussion.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. When that housing got built on the old Henry's plant farm, and the people who were on Seattle Hill Road didn't want to participate, that kind of made some orphan properties, but it just doesn't make sense now to do that connection because it'd be $1.5 million for a roundabout on Seattle Hill Road.
Right,
So that we just got rid of the east end of that project. And the west end of the project is from like Buffalo Park,
Mhm.
goes past the church, goes past the, what's the lawyer's building's name? Gateway,
Mm-mm.
the Jeff Pratt's building, can't remember what it's called. And the Rim Kim property is the
Mhm.
one that's still there. It's those three pieces of road, but the stormwater, and that's what got so expensive, is that we have the right of way on Jeff Pratt's piece. We'd have to work with the church to get the right of way. We'd have to work with Rim Kim property to get the right of way, and then you have to build the stormwater for all of it and the road for all of it. And that's how it keeps adding up to millions of dollars.
Mhm.
And that's where we're still, it'll be coming back to you folks to say, what do we want to do with that? But that's one of the studies that Frank put in his, I
Yeah.
keep saying his, but in that book, it's
Yes.
in that book. It's one of those things, and it's changed from being $500,000 towards buying the right of way of an $8 million project. Now it's, let's rethink this and see what
Okay.
makes sense in terms of connecting that community, but something not probably multimodal, not driving trucks back and forth.
Right.
basically.
So then, and so to refer to that area, the appropriate language is West Spine Road versus East Spine Road.
Yes, I
Okay.
think we're gonna start dropping the word Spine Road because
Right.
I conjured up the road.
Yeah.
It'd be the
West
West
Connection.
Connection. Yeah, and I can't remember what he called it. I don't have the book in front of me.
Yeah, I
It's the
can.
West Connection, something like that.
I thought it still said Spine Road, but thank you.
I took you off on a tangent, but hopefully it helped.
No,
Thanks.
yeah.
I just want to ask,
Um,
Yeah.
It was me that said, hold on. So Laurel, do we need to give this money back then if we're not going to take out a loan to build something?
I believe so. That is what I've been working with the state on. I will be very surprised if they don't ask for their funding back. I will say they did let me know that this money, they will be putting it back in, I believe it's called the CURB program. And so it will be available again, but that way we'll have a project everyone supports. And then we can get that grant funding.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Councilmember Paddock? Oh, that was your question.
not quite as eloquent, but yeah.
Okay, so we're moving on into REIT. So REIT is going to be the fund that basically is the cash cow for all of our different capital funds. So you have 314 is the REIT, and that flows into 316, 317, and 318. So 316 is going to be just your regular capital improvement fund. That's going to be any kind of just regular city buildings, city property. Then you have 317, that's going to be your parks and open space, those capital projects. And then 318 is going to be the street related capital projects. So this is the funding that makes all of that happen, which is why we were so excited that REIT was coming in 40% over what we were expecting. So that's really going to help us with our capital projects. I did go ahead and I've got expenses through 2024. I will say I wasn't 100% on moving forward because we don't know how much REIT funding we're going to need. So I just went ahead and left it. I know we've got quite a bit of REIT funding in the different capital project funds already for the different projects because there were transfers done in 2020, 2021. I've got a couple, I'm going to finish off the 2022 so that I at least have an idea of where that REIT funding was supposed to go. We were wanting to make sure the amount that's hitting the funds ties to what the overall picture was. And so then 23 and 24, we put some in there. We just don't know how much we're going to need beyond that because the CIP is not quite finished. So more than likely, this will be a more finished picture after the CIP hearing. And then I will say I went ahead and increased revenues farther out, but for 2023 and 24, I did about 85% of our projected 22 revenues, just because the housing market has slowed a bit. We don't know what's happening with different interest rates, and that's really, houses aren't moving as fast. So that's going to decrease what we bring in. All right, so this is the 316 fund. So this is going to be anything 25,000 or more. that has a 5-year life, that's gonna sit here if it's not related to parks and it's not related to roads. So again, we're not certain beyond 2024. So after the CIP hearing, our expenses will be farther out. Okay, maybe that's not a typo. I think there's just alignment issues for 2025. So we've got estimated revenues based on what we're expecting to come in, what's historically come in. And then I'm trying to remember what happened in 2021 that was. Oh, so the 2021, the large amount, that 3.4 million, that is the surface water transfer. So before I came, the funding for the bond had been originally put in surface water, then it got moved to the capital funds. But because surface water is paying for that debt and it was specifically put in place for the surface water program, we needed to move that back. So that's what that amount is. It's just a transfer back. Okay, and so overall, this fund is still relatively healthy. Okay, same with parks and open space. So this is going to be mitigation fees, different grants, and then any kind of REIT transfer. Any kind of capital project you see in that CIP related to parks, that will fall in here. At this point in time, we're expecting 673,000 and possibly 75,000 in 2024. And we will see where we fall from 25 to 28. Okay, so the road improvement fund, this fund was a bit clearer. So I had gone through, I had worked with Mike Todd and Frank, and this is essentially where we're thinking, at least what has been planned that's in the CIP, this is where we're going to be falling for the road improvement. We have a lot of road work that has not been done because we haven't had the staffing. So we are going to be hitting that harder. And we have a solid fund balance in this specific fund. All right, so surface water. I'm gonna move this guy for you. So surface water, we have, I don't think we got the ecology grant this year, but we are going to be applying for that annually. So I did go ahead and add that for 23 through 28. If the program changes, we'll adjust this. And then the other main revenue source are the stormwater fees that you see on your property taxes. I believe that's roughly 0.03 cents. Or maybe it was, I think it was 3 cents for every dollar. Yes.
$206 per house.
Yeah. And
We'll fix it so that $50,000 is per biennium, and so it's only 25 per year, so grants are
why?
tricky there.
Okay, so I need to fix that.
This biennium, but you can't do that.
Okay, so that's going to decrease by 200,000 to 300,000. Okay, I will say charges for goods and services, or well, your surface water fees, those are going to be increasing. You have an automatic increase of 3% every year. So we've got that holding the surface water in good shape right now, as we work through what we want this program to look like. All right, so we do have salaries that hit in here, and then I just went ahead and laid out where the funding is hitting. We have some capital. The debt service is going to be Penny Creek, the public works loan, and then the transfer out is going to be that GO bond that goes to the debt service fund for these two lines. All right, for equipment replacement, this is going to be where all of the different departments, the different funds put their money. If we want to replace a truck, we'll purchase one. We will take it out 5 years, say, straight line depreciation 10%. And then we're hoping to buy another vehicle at the end of its useful life. So that depreciation amount gets put into this fund each year. And then we will be purchasing 2 different police vehicles in 23 and 24. And then we are planning on doing the desktop refresh across the city, just because I believe there's a Windows version that's going away and it's forcing us to do this. So. All right, last one is the unemployment compensation and self-insurance fund. So if we had some unanticipated large deductible for a different property insurance, auto liability coverage, we could pull that funding from here. And then any kind of unemployment claims also come into here. We were getting, we had about half what we typically have in this fund. So I went ahead and did a transfer from general fund for 25,000 for 23 and then 25,000 again in 24. I will say I budgeted that full expense of 25,000 in 23 and 24. I'm sorry, I did one transfer in 23, 2 expenses of 25,000. I don't plan on using that for the expenses, but it's there if we need it, just in case something happens. But if we don't need it, we won't be using it. All right. So from here, I can take additional questions, or we can.
I've got one question, maybe a couple. On the road improvement fund, you had mentioned that those expenditures would be filled out or based on staffing that we would have to actually execute on those programs?
So on all of our different capital projects, we can get grants, but if we can't, if we don't have the staff to be, if we don't have engineers
Right.
to do the projects, then we're never going to get anywhere. And we can put funding there, but it's just going to sit, which is why all of our capital funds have larger balances. It's not because we're sitting in great shape and we're just bringing a ton of revenue in. It's because we haven't been spending money.
And do we have,
haven't had salaries hitting those different funds.
and do we have those salaries now built into the budget so that we can start executing on those programs?
We have Frank, 1 engineer, and then we have a surface water coordinator. And then we have Tom Rogers' old position. I don't believe he would necessarily be doing that, but he would possibly be helping.
Yeah, so I think what earlier, so we've got Frank, a city engineer, and we have 1 project engineer we've been hunting for, that we've been trying. So that's the person we're missing in this biennium. What Laurel proposed earlier is if we use some of that ARPA funds and relieve some of that, that was gonna, she had down below that, she said possibly another engineer in there. So that's what Frank really needs that. It may take another person beyond that as an inspector or assistant to get the program going, but we're just trying to ramp it up. We can't hire 3 people immediately anyway.
Got it.
But what I think Laurel was talking about, so in the road improvement funds, there's a bunch of money in there. This typically has a bunch of money because we're typically doing paving projects. We haven't done any paving projects for a couple of years. And so that's why it's kind of got a bump in terms of the balance. In the out years, what she's done is she's taken some of the numbers out of the CIP project list that Frank presented to you before and put them in there. But this isn't, if you look at the out years for 25, 26, 27, 28, that's not fully fleshed out yet. That's part of the discussion we're going to have about staffing and funding on all of those. So
Okay.
she's just kind of saying 25 through 28, don't get too attached to, but 23 and 24 are the numbers that we think we'd expect to spend if we had the staffing.
Great.
Does that help?
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point. So you can see we were under 200,000 and under 400,000 in 21 and 22. And then, well, this is where we're projecting to be. And then in 23, we're really, really ramping up. So that is going to take all hands on deck approach to really get caught up on all these different projects, all of these streets related projects. Yes.
So what I just heard though is if we have the staffing, and what Councilmember Paddock asked was, did we have the staffing in the way we did it? And so with the numbers that have been presented, minus, not including ARPA, what you're presenting now, we do not have. Because we're looking, to be able to make any substantial hits to this, we do need another. So that's what we're trying to figure out on how that needs to happen.
Correct.
So we cannot, okay, good, because I thank you.
Yeah, so we have the one engineer position that we have not been able to fill, but it really would be very helpful to have two engineers to get the volume of projects from here going forward in the, as long as we can see.
And how long has that position been searching for? That was the one that we had someone and they left. And that was, since February, and we haven't. So is the intent that it might need to be a different, the new one would have to be something different because we're still not able to get the criteria
Why we
credentials.
did the salary study.
No, yes, but now that has been put in place and we're not,
Well, no, so.
no, it hasn't.
The
Not yet.
engineers is, that's the one that you're still working on is that chunk of folks that are in the contract. And so I think that's what staff's
Thank you.
working on, but it's the planners, engineers, that level in the middle that we're having trouble with.
Yeah, so if we were to change salaries, it would likely be related to opening that CBA back up. So it's not as easy as we would like it to be. And we are fairly close on internal reviews on salaries. Anything else?
I just want to go back to I don't think we have it in our packet, but you brought it up in the, one of your slides around the comprehensive plan spend, like, hey, theoretically, we could move X to
Yes.
Y. Would we lose any of the grants that we received for the comprehensive plan if we pay for that with ARPA funds?
I don't believe so.
Okay, I think
I
that'd be
would
one
have
thing to
to
check on.
verify that there's no kind of matching
Mhm.
for those grants, but there's not, okay, yeah, so then we would be able to.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep.
Got it, thanks.
Okay,
All right, are we ready to open up for public comment? Okay, I'd like to open the floor for public comment. Does anyone in the room, would anyone in the room like to comment? I don't think so. And I do see Will's hand raised. Mr. Nelson, would you like to comment on the budget?
Mr. Wilson, are you able to unmute your device?
Yeah, he's got two. He's on top, he's got another one down here that's showing it's muted down on the bottom.
I'm wondering if he's the telephone number that's online
He did.
and we would have to allow him to speak.
Good, well, there's
I
a
believe
W.
it's *5 for when you're calling in to unmute, or the system should tell him.
He's
Well, he's got a second window down here. Do we need to unmute that window? Or did he just hit *5?
doesn't
You're
matter.
unable to unmute for him. It is up to the end user to mute and unmute themselves.
He's trying.
Does he want to call maybe Asa
Looks like he's on.
or?
I know, is there any?
I'm sorry, Mr. Nelson, it's *6.
Oh, *6 will.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Finally. Apparently a software update messed up Zoom on my computer. Sorry for the confusion. Few comments. When I looked at the agenda earlier, not today, I did not see Laura's notes in there. And this is about the third time that this has happened. Can we correct that in the future where we get Laura's presentations put in the city agendas? in an appropriate and timely manner so that the public can review them rather than wait for the last minute and only be able to look at it when she's presenting it. That would be very nice. Two, on the fund budget detail, I'm not understanding on, and I missed some of this presentation. Under general fund expenses down at the bottom, it says less fire contract, add back fire marshal services. I don't understand why you add back the services if it's for 21 and 22 and the math doesn't compute. At
So
least
I
my math didn't
don't
compute.
have that in front of me, but I
Eh.
will say we were trying to give you a relative number for the previous year if we had taken that out, what it would be so that you could see that comparison for the 23-24 biennium.
Well, I understand that, but that money was never expended for fire marshals. And why put it in there if it was never expended? And finally, enough complaining. No, one more complaint. If the council's going to do a 1% levy increase, doesn't that kind of negate giving the money back? If you take it away in one hand and you add it in on the other side, just a food for thought. But what I really wanted to talk about was the voters handed the city a great big gift when they voted in the fire contract, and they saved the council an awful lot of angst in labor and work and figuring out where to get money from. And next year, the council will have a very large amount of money in banked accounts, banked money, and that was really a very, very big gift to the city. Thanks to a former Democrat mayor in Edmonds who was on the in the state legislature a few years ago. However, this is going to impact senior citizens a whole lot. Me, not so much, but a lot of these people, and Mike knows who I'm talking about because I've heard him, Mike Todd, I've heard him mention before that some of these people get pretty pressed on even a $50 increase in taxes. Next year, it's going to be absolutely horrendous. And even though they're getting a pretty good Social Security increase, most of that's going to get eaten up in the increased fire contract services. So again, I would question the propriety of adding a 1% levy increase for next year. Guess that's about all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Would anyone else like to comment? I don't think I see any more hands. Just double checking one more time. No one else in the audience would like to speak? All right. With that, I think it is time for me to entertain a motion to close the public hearing, if I'm correct.
Motion to close.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously.
Just a good job, Asa and Joe, for getting Will on the phone.
Yes, thank you. Okay, and so now is the time where council can engage in discussion on the proposed changes. So is there anything anyone would like to discuss? Councilmember Cavallari.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, Will's comments do not fall on deaf ears. I think every one of us are feeling the pinch, the inflationary pinch. I think the average household has seen an increase of $5,100, $5,136 and change over the last year, and it's not getting any better anytime soon. But with that comes the increased cost to conduct business in the city, cost of operations. We're talking about projects sitting on the shelves for years now that we have, scoped out and ready to go and just don't have the engineers to do it because we're not paying them enough. So we're behind the times a little bit. And while we do appreciate what the voters did in the annexation for District 1, we also knew that these costs were coming. We knew that we were going to have to hire a fire marshal. We knew we were going to have to buy the station out. And so we knew these costs were coming, and normally tax increases aren't in my wheelhouse. I'm not a big fan, but I'm open to hearing what we have to say. And when we dive into the numbers a little further, I think we're going to see that the cost of poker has gone up, and we have been very good stewards thus far. And we talked about utility taxes before, and I oppose them, but it's going to have to come from somewhere. And so, again, I'm just suggesting open minds and open hearts. But Will, I completely sympathize with you, and many of us are in the same boat. So we'll try as be as, I guess, gentle as possible. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments? Okay, I have a couple comments. I would like to see us to figure out a way to get this engineer. And so with that, I know I've been trying to look through the budget, and I have spoken with the mayor. And one thing that we were discussing was the possibility of letting go of the $60,000 the first year, not the second, for the lobbyists, because we are getting towards the end of the year. And we thought we could maybe let that $60,000 go in the budget, just as a starting point for discussion. And I know I am one of the people that had reached out to Deputy Brock and asked her, how can we make this happen? Because we want to be able to get the grants, we want to be able to do things, but Director Todd needs people to be able to go out and do those things. And so I want to see how we can find money in this budget for that person. And how are we going to rearrange things? And so I am in favor of using some of the ARPA funds to pay for the one-time expense of doing the comp plan. If we're able to do that, to free up those funds, since that is a one-time, once every 10 years event that we are doing, then to me, it makes sense to use some ARPA funds for that, because it's not like we're using ARPA funds for something that's going to be a recurring event we're going to need to be coming up with money for. So I feel that is a perfect fit, because I also feel that the ARPA funds were here to fill the gaps of money that we did not get during COVID, to go for things that we need to run the city. And I feel very strongly about that. So I really would like to see us figure out how to get that extra person in. And I do hear the chief when he talked to us on their needs, and everybody needs somebody. So, but I think if I can only get one and have to focus, and I would focus on that extra engineer, because there is so much we need to get done in the city, and we do want those grants, and we do want to be able to keep moving forward. So I think that's my main comment. Not sure if anybody else wants to comment from that.
I have a comment. So you talked about the lobbying fund. I can't seem to find it in here now. Was there a allocation in 2022 and then in 2023?
No, we put one for 23 and 24, and I think we should take out the 23 one. And I think it's pulled into our legislative fund, I believe.
Okay, my only concern would be it's a longer session in 23 and a shorter session in 24. So maybe half that amount in 24 or something. I mean, there's only half the time. So, on those short session years, they don't get as much done. There shouldn't need to be as much lobbying.
Yeah, I think that's something we should discuss. Yeah, we haven't actually got around to looking at a lobbyist yet.
Right.
To see what it's gonna cost. So, but I definitely am in favor of knocking it off the first year, because I don't think I think we can say we're not gonna get there.
And I will note that I budgeted 60,000 for both years. So maybe cut that by 30 instead of 60.
Yeah, or maybe if we don't think we're going to get there for 23, we could just eliminate it. And then cut what is in for 24 in half, because it's a short session. You know, every other year is a short session, and that's the short session year. So it just doesn't seem like we would need to invest the same amount on a short session year that we would on a long session year.
I think we're hiring the same one employee though, so.
Yeah, but we could make those funds available, you know, that would be 90,000, right? That we would be able to pull out of that line item over 2 years. Okay, that's my 2 cents.
So it's 60,000 total.
Oh, it's
So
total.
it's
Okay,
Oh,
I
60,000
couldn't find it.
annually.
I thought we
Okay.
had 60,000 each year.
I may have misunderstood. I thought we were looking for 60,000
Okay.
overall. So maybe not cut that.
Well, maybe cut at least the 30,000 for the first year. I think.
If I can pile onto that one, sorry. If I could pile onto that one, I would recommend actually taking it completely out of the budget. What we've heard, I think, is that we don't have the capacity to deliver on most of the projects that we actually have in queue now. And the idea of bringing some folks on, which I would totally agree, Mayor Pro Tem, about, you know, the ARPA funds going to the comprehensive plan, work that needs to be done and reutilizing those to have another engineer. Let's build up the capacity first and then start going after, or maybe a little bit before, start going after the grant funding from the legislature. That would just be what I would like to see. That was it.
Thank you. Councilmember Duque.
Did you have something else though before? Because you were going to go first and then I think you just added to that convo, so I can wait.
I put those 2 pieces together on that
Of course you
comprehensive
did.
plan part. Yep.
Okay, so I have 2 comments and I'll start with what we were just talking about. I happen to agree with Councilmember Paddock, especially in terms of understanding what it is we're looking for a lobbyist, what we're looking for in terms of the city, if we can find other like-minded cities to partner with in terms of getting someone part-time. I'm not familiar with that world at all. So I understand there'd be a lot of research, but I think based off what we've heard, there seems to be others, but just wanted to flag. I know we haven't gone down actually what it is, the nuts and bolts of what we're looking for, but in terms of like partnering with other cities, I think that might be a direction we should move towards. I wanted to flag when it comes to an additional engineer or public works in general. I think it's one thing that's been missing is a proactive communication strategy about how we explain to residents where their money goes and how things and what the city does and what public works does and what does it mean to have an engineer. You can't, I doubt there's very few people who could answer what that means. And as someone who attended many years city council meetings, I mean, even I had difficulty trying to capture that. And I think that clear, proactive communications about what we're doing, what this means, and not being reactive is really important so that people they just know that we're doing things and they know that we're moving forward, and not just because they see construction, but because it's part of what we do as a city and not kind of an afterthought.
Anyone else have any comments?
I did have one piece that I'm thinking will be easier if you can see it. So we mentioned the engineer and I just wanted to touch base on the planner and the administrative assistant. And just to gauge where we're at on those positions. So we've got the,
So my question on the planner was, so we are still looking for a senior planner? No, we are not.
so we currently
We-
have an associate planner.
Correct.
And a senior planner. And if we were to potentially move the associate planner to a regular planner, it would make it so that we could have both of them working on the comp plan instead of having a
Ah.
contractor come in.
Yes.
And so it really would benefit the city in the long run, especially for the small impact on our budget.
Thank you. That was my question, is I didn't understand the work breakout or who could do what, and I assumed that's why it was a associate planner to planner. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and we will have to work with AFSMI to adjust that if that is approved by council. And then I think the last one was just, I mainly need everyone's temperature on the City Hall North Administrative Assistant. And we did used to have something similar. We had that position removed when the person left. And this is a little different on what we're asking from them because was it building codes and yes, please.
So many cities have a building permit intake function that, to be honest, is a very administrative clerk-like thing that you need to do very precisely and very accurately. And we combined that a couple of years ago when we did the reduction in force during COVID. We had somebody who was doing that. That job got added on to an associate planner. And so we replaced that person when they retired with that same function because we have to have somebody when you want a permit for your roof or your water heater or your new building or your kitchen remodel. Those come in every day. There's hundreds of these things that go on every week. And that's about half of the job is pretty much clerical kinds of stuff, intaking things, putting them together and making sure the inspector shows up on time to get the job done. So that's a function we need to do. That's underutilizing somebody as a planner. So that's what we're talking about, is really trying to split that off. So it's kind of an administrative function. The other thing that I think there's an opportunity if the marketing and communication folks were here. We're trying to increase revenue for renting out City Hall North. But when they're doing that, they can't put together a parade or they can't do a other event. And so when we opened the doors to City Hall North, it went nuts with the phone going up. How do we schedule those rooms? Giving some assistance to those folks for peak for projects and stuff would really help. There's a lot of scheduling that goes on with our program. So that the City Hall North administrative assistant is kind of a collection of things. Maybe it also helps us with our code enforcement. Right now, we're just reactionary. So if somebody calls, we try to deal with it. But maybe we'd have some capacity to do some other things. So it's kind of amorphous right now, but we're saying if we had one more person like we used to have and utilize them effectively, that could help us out. And the reason City Hall North is right now, if you walk in our building, there's nobody answering the door. We don't really want to have somebody just sitting there being a receptionist, but we're just don't have that function to support those folks. So it's kind of a combination of stuff that we're talking about there.
And I will say this is the biennial impact, not an annual impact. So that one comprehensive removal, that and half of a legislative lobbyist would get us where we needed to be and give us a little bit of wiggle room in the general fund. If that was where council wanted to go. Okay, and that was,
If we did go with those additional heads, it looks like the 23-24 FTE count would go up to 66,
yes,
which is still 3 below 27, or excuse me, 17 through 20.
right.
So we're still
And-
understaffed or less
and
than staffed. than
One
we were
of
prior.
those is also part-time passport people, so it's not quite the same. So it really is like we're down that person as well.
Mhm. Still pretty conservative then.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Decay.
Because I think you were asking for like a temperature check on it.
Yes.
So I'm a huge fan of making sure we have different levels of of skill sets in an office. And so for me, it was Mike Child's the underutilization. I had to make a phone call to ask about some type of permit. And then, my embarrassment when I had to speak to Justin, because I was like, this is not what you needed on your day for me to ask these, kind of questions. But so I think that's really important, because sometimes we get very top heavy, and I would like us to make sure that we are not top heavy and we're finding the right staff to be able to do that. But also because there's an opportunity for growth, people who want to, work in a city and want to be in that kind of environment, but don't have the degrees to be an urban planner, a planner. So then it's interesting, because you might give opportunities to people who may go back to school for something that they learned about or learning on the job. So, anytime there's a temperature check, I'm always a big fan of those types of positions.
Councilmember Cavallari.
Thank you. I think I would support the position if we could see maybe I know the director taught explained it, maybe the scope of work or what we're actually hiring. Are they going to be able to do the planning piece or the permitting piece like you asked, or is this just an administrative assistant that's going to run around helping others, kind of putting out fires and whatnot? So I think that would be helpful. I like the idea of finding a support base for, especially if you're having, we're over and underutilizing our personnel. So I think that's a smart way to do business, but I would kind of like to see a bill of particulars of what the scope of work is going to be. Thank you.
I agree with Councilmember Cavallari. I think that would be extremely helpful to just get a better idea of what that would look like. How would that person actually open up others to get more things in that we need to get done? Would that person be able to bring in more money because we're able to have more enforcement of things? So yeah, I'd be really interested in seeing how it would play out, and then we could entertain it, I think. Did anyone else have any questions? All right, I think that's it. All right, moving on to new business. Tonight we have an Arts and Beautification Board appointment. We had one person apply for the open seat, which was actually the seat that she's currently holding, and that's Carmen Fisher. So do I have a motion to, do I have a motion to nominate? I'm trying to look, what motion do we need? Because we need, oh yeah, there it is. Thank you. It's right in front of my face. Do I have a nomination to move to appoint Carmen Fisher to the 3-year term? So
Mayor, go ahead.
Second.
all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Next, we will move on to code amendments. I have down Clay White, planning consultant, and Justin Horn, associate planner for that.
Great. Thank you, council members. For the record, Clay White, interim planning manager. So tonight, one of the things that the planning office has been doing this year is taking stock of the code and how it functions. Really want to make sure that when you have a code, it's really can be used properly by those that are building a fence or an accessory building, making sure that we have a consistent code that's easy for everyone to use. So we've got a nice list of code issues that I think is just kind of that general cleanup, and you should always be kind of maintaining those. So the first on the list is talking about fences and locations, and then also accessory buildings. So one of the things is Justin and Sybil have done a great job of identifying topics to bring to the Planning Commission and Council. And Justin really proactively took this on. We've been working with the Planning Commission to get code amendments put together, and he's got a presentation for you tonight. So I'll hand it over to Justin. I'll be here if you have questions as well. So
All right, good evening, council members. So here's an overview of my presentation. So first, I'll be covering the background of our code changes, why we're going to be doing them or proposing them. Then an overview of what we want to change, and then our staff recommendation. And before we get started, some of these rules are very confusing. So if it's not totally clear at first, you're in good company. It's confusing to all of us. So no worries about that. So first, fence regulations. You may remember several months ago, we had a citizen come in who was concerned about what he was allowed to do. And so that was really the impetus to really get this one moved to the top of the list. Quick note, here's some zones in the city that I'll be referring to a number of times. So just a quick refresher. We've got the LDR zone, which is the color's a little different on the screen. This light yellow is over here, and the PRD zone is this darker yellow in the middle. So one big question we run into is, where is the right of way? It's not always obvious, and many homeowners aren't aware of where the right of way ends and where their property line is, where the property begins. It's pretty clear when you have a sidewalk. It's usually the edge of the sidewalk. That's where your right of way is. But if there's no sidewalk, it's more murky. As an example here, the orange lines you see, these are the property lines. And you can see there's a pretty big gap between where the property line is and the street edge is. Many homeowners assume that that gap is theirs and it's landscaped, and they're welcome to landscape it and use it if the city is not using it, but it is part of the right of way, that gap between the street and the property line. We could put sidewalks in there or street trees or do maintenance on it. But what's relevant to fences is because many people think that where the street edge ends, that's where the property line is. If they have a 10-foot setback, they need 10 feet from the street edge. That's not the case. It's actually 10 feet from the property line, which could be 15 or more feet from the street. And one thing that Mr. Casper brought up a few months ago when he has his concern was, why are fences built in the wrong place? There are a lot of fences that don't meet our current rules. There's several reasons. One, they could have been built when before the property was annexed into the city. So the county has different rules, and property can keep their fence the same place as long as they're not moving around. They can keep it where it was originally approved. The other reason is it may not be permitted at all. Most cities don't require permits for fences. It's not a building code requirement. It's purely aesthetic. So a lot of cities don't require them, and people who move from the cities or fence contractors may not be aware they need a permit. So it could just be ignorance in some cases. So our current code does not allow fences over 42 inches to be built in a front yard setback. So you can have a short fence, like a picket fence, right up on your property line. But if you want a full 6-foot fence, it needs to meet, it can't be in the front yard setback. And what are those setbacks? In the PRD zone, it's 15 feet. In the LDR zone, it's 20 feet. Except in the LDR zone, and only the LDR zone, there is an exemption where on the non-driveway side, you can reduce the setback to 10 feet. I'm going to show an example of that because it's a little confusing. If you see on the left here, it's the example from the PRD zone. So the white lines are where you could build a fence. See, it's 15 feet back from the property line on each side. And on the right, we have the LDR zone, which normally be 20 feet. And you can see on the driveway side, it is 20 feet, but on the non-driveway side, it's only 10 feet. And that dashed line is where it would be if it were 20 without the exemption. And here's what it looks like in practice. So in the PRD zone, it's 15 feet. You can see there's 15 feet from the edge of the right of way to the fence, but not the edge of the street. People probably assume it's probably about a 5 feet of right of way. So it's actually 20 feet from the edge of the street. Similarly, in the LDR zone, this was what 20 feet would look like. You can see there's 20 feet from the edge of the right of way to the fence. This is without the exemption. If they use that exemption, the 10-foot exemption, you could build a fence where this white line is. So it cuts down that setback by 50% essentially. And here's what it looks like if you have the 10-foot exemption. This fence is 10 feet from the property line. All right, so what are the issues? The first issue is setbacks are not consistent between residential zones. The LDR zone has this exemption. There's all these different setbacks. It's confusing to staff and to homeowners. It's not ideal. One other issue is that the current setback constrains how much usable yard space you can have. So if we look back at the examples, there's quite a bit of space that the homeowner can't fence in. They want a private fence or private yard space for the kids to play in or just to use in privacy. There's quite a bit of room that's they're not allowed to use. And lastly, as I said, many homeowners are mistaken about the edge or where their property line is, or where they build the fence. So we have some proposals that we've worked with the Planning Commission to create. This is showing what the Planning Commission recommended in their resolution. So our current setbacks are on the left and a proposal is on the right. So currently in the LDR zone, you have, oh, and I should preface it saying we're only looking at corner lots today. Only ones are on a corner that have 2 frontages on 2 streets. So we have 10 feet in the LDR zone, 15 feet in the PRD zone. And we have proposed to change that to 5 feet in the LDR zone when there is a sidewalk and 0 feet in the LDR zone when there's no sidewalk, and the same with the PRD. So what does that sidewalk, no sidewalk thing mean? Since the whole reason to have those setbacks is aesthetic. When there is a sidewalk, we want a gap between the sidewalk and the fence. But when there is no sidewalk, you don't need as big of a gap because there's already that right of way that's being unused. And so a 5-foot setback with a sidewalk looks the same as a 0-foot setback with no sidewalk. Side note, we have an amendment sheet to actually change that proposed setback from 0 feet to 2 feet, which I'll cover in a minute. So here's what that will look like. This fence has a 5-foot setback. You can see there's still a pretty good gap between the sidewalk and the fence. There's room for landscaping, and it's not, it doesn't feel constrained or claustrophobic. There's still nice, it still feels nice as a pedestrian, and it still looks nice. While allowing a little more room for the homeowner to have that private yard space. And here's an example of what a 0-foot setback would be with no sidewalk. You can still see there's a, since there's no sidewalk in that right-of-way space, there still is a gap between the street and the fence. It still looks nice and it maintains that aesthetic we're looking for. Now, we do have an amendment sheet to the Planning Commission's recommendation. We want to change the minimum setback from 0 feet to 2 feet. And the reason for that is if we were to go back and add a sidewalk later, let's say we got a grant out of the blue, we could build the sidewalks, we could still maintain a bit of a setback between the fence and the sidewalk. And here's what they look like. So on the right, you can see we have 5 feet setbacks with sidewalks and 2 feet setbacks with no sidewalks. And this example we want to avoid, this is a fence that was built, there's a sidewalk there and there's no setback and it doesn't feel very nice when you're walking past it and doesn't look as nice either. So we want to avoid that and make sure we still have a bit of space from the sidewalk if they were added later. All right, so here's an example and another example of what we are looking for. So we have in the LDR zone currently that 10-foot, pointer. We have 10 feet here. That's what's currently allowed. And we would like to change it to 5 feet, which would be here. And then this is with a sidewalk. If there's no sidewalk, which was this example, you could then move that to 2 feet. You see there's still quite a bit of space here that's left. It still looks nice. And they could move basically 8 more feet of yard space back to use. Similarly with the PRD zone, currently it's 15 feet. And we propose 5 feet if there's a sidewalk and 2 feet if there's no sidewalk. All right, I'm gonna stop for a minute. Any questions so far?
Councilmember Cavallari.
Thank you. So I guess the white elephant or pink elephant in the room is, how does this affect Mr. Carver? Oh, Casper.
Yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. This is going to allow him to build a fence more or less where he wanted to build it originally. I don't have a picture of his property on my presentation, but one of his big issues was that he was measuring from the edge of the street on the property line. And so he said, I have 10 feet of space. We said, no, first of all, you're in the wrong zone. You don't get that exemption. And it's not 10 feet. You actually need to push it back another 5 feet. So he was needing to do 20 feet from the edge of the street into his yard. And this would allow him to bring that down to only, 5 feet, 2 feet, 7 feet. So he'd get 13 feet of yard space back, which is what he was looking for.
Well, then, thank you to everyone for finding a sweet spot and a solution here for someone who is very passionate about his project. Thanks.
Thanks.
Councilmember Duque.
So I know you had a public hearing
Mhm.
for this with the planning commission. And so I'm curious why there's an amendment that we're seeing that wasn't available during the hearing and that the planning commission did.
Yeah, great question. So when we discussed it with the planning commission originally, we had it set for 0 feet
Mhm.
with no sidewalk. And the way we wrote it was that if we anticipate there being no sidewalk ever built there, that's when we could apply that. So it requires some discretion. But then after we had the planning commission, we were discussing the exact language we want to use. We thought, there could be a situation in the future where, we get more money to build sidewalks, that is not planned for, but it's possible. So we should plan for that and make sure that we don't end up with a no setback if the sidewalk is built.
Okay. And then I still had a couple more questions, if that's okay. Mayor, okay, good. I didn't know if someone else had already marked in. Would you mind going to page 36 of your PowerPoint?
Yes.
Oh, maybe it's not page 36. 36 on my slides.
What is the headline?
It is, let me find it. The 0 setback with no sidewalk.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, sorry, so starting from there, so.
The table, this one?
No, it's a picture with.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, this one.
Yeah, spring, yep.
It's actually a crest view.
The one with the new fence.
Yes,
This one,
that one,
sorry.
thank you.
This
So
one.
so it's 17. I didn't see the number at the bottom. I'll check for my next question. There you go. That's my fault. Okay, so I was curious, this one, you showed us this as an example. But that's before the amendment,
Mhm.
right? So where could you, is there a pointer up there or could you show us? So then where would it be with what you're asking? So where could the fence be then for this if it's 2?
Right, so assuming that this is the actual edge, this is the actual property line, it'd be 2 feet back from this fences.
Okay, because right now it's at 0.
Yes,
They already have it at 0, but they weren't supposed to have it at 0?
they were not supposed to have it at 0. I don't know the history of this one. There was no permit for it. So it's an unpermitted fence.
Yeah, that's why I was asking because That's exactly why, because I was like, that doesn't look like it. So it would, so for future, it would be 2 feet wise. And then your example you gave us, I think is the community off of 132nd that you gave the example of the sidewalk and then the fence right up next to it. So as someone who lives in an HOA, I know for aesthetics, I believe I understand what you're saying, that it's uncomfortable to walk right next to a fence. And you guys are professionals, but to get homeowners to actually take care of that little strip of land between the sidewalk and their fence is nearly impossible to do. So what you're running the risk of is having it just be horrible from there to the fence because they won't take care of it, specifically when there's a sidewalk. So I'm absolutely happy with, if no sidewalk, then doing the 2 feet, I guess, because then you're building in a sidewalk and hopefully then you don't have a little bit of grass between the next fence or something like that. But in examples like this, as someone who's had to walk around communities when we used to do it that way, it's miserable. I think this looks better and cleaner than anything with a 2 foot setback, because that'll be a no man's zone because the homeowner won't take care of that area because it's not theirs. But I 100% don't believe the city will come by to trim that little piece of grass. So that is my opinion on the setback with sidewalk.
Yeah, it's a great point. And in an ideal world, we wouldn't ever have that happen because
Right.
we would say, there's no sidewalk built here. But yeah, it's a possibility, and we can keep it to 0 feet. We had a discussion about do we want to keep it at 0, do it 2, and you can certainly go either way. And the way the ordinance is written is going to be at 0, and you can amend it if you want or not. It's really up to you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Paddock?
The question I had was, since these are mostly corner lots, does this open up any sort of driving safety issues, just line of sight coming around corners and whatnot? I'm wondering if that was the original intent of having the back set.
Yeah, great point. I didn't include that in presentation. It's addressed separately. There's another section of the code that requires a site triangle to be maintained. So you can't have it a certain distance from the corner. All right, so with that, I'll move on to accessory building regulations. So our current code says that you can have an accessory building up to 5 feet to the property line. Accessory buildings being anything that's not, the principal home, a shed, a playhouse, anything like that. And they can only be a maximum of 600 square feet and 15 feet tall for a single story or 25 feet tall for a 2-story structure. Now, there's a couple issues with how this is written. First of all, a 25 feet structure, 600 square feet, is pretty tall to be right next to the property line. It kind of towers over any fence you build, and it could negatively impact the privacy of neighboring properties. And the other issue we have is that there's a number of residential properties in the eGov zone that have not yet developed. So they've been rezoned to eGov, but they're still single family homes and they're not allowed to build accessory buildings because eGov does not allow accessory buildings. So the changes, here's an example of where those properties are. It's near the farm along Seattle Hill Road. That yellow shaded area is what we're talking about. About a dozen properties, I believe. So we have some proposed changes. First, we want to change the size regulations into sort of a 2-prong approach, to where if you're very close to the property line, we're going to shrink how big that building can be. Instead of 600 square feet, it'll be 400. Instead of 25 feet, it'll be 12 feet. But then if you build a building further back from the property line, where you meet the normal setbacks for the home, the principal structure, you would then be allowed to build a larger accessory building that would be subject to the zone. So if the zone says 25 feet on this property for all buildings, that's the limit for accessory buildings. Or 35% lot coverage, that's your lot coverage. And we want to allow accessory buildings in the eGov zone. I don't have any good graphs or charts for that, but I'd be happy to answer any questions about those.
Councilmember Allison?
Could you please define what eGov stands for?
Oh, yes, absolutely. It's the East Gateway Urban Village. It's actually go back to way back to the original zoning slide. Oh, there it is. Oh, here we go. It's this area right here, where it's the farm and like near Buffalo Park, this area here.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right.
Any other
questions?
questions?
All right. So staff recommendation is to adopt the ordinance and amendment sheet 1. And so procedures for that would be adopt the ordinance or motion up the ordinance, motion to adopt amendment sheet 1, vote on the amendment sheet and the main motion. Don't have it in front of me. But do you remember what sheet that's what page it's on in the it's in there outside. It's after the ordinance. So it's me, yeah, the long list of code changes. It should go after that. I can pull it up. Okay, I got it on the screen here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I don't see it in my packet, but it's probably me. All right, do I have, does anyone want to make a motion?
The Zoom audience is unable to hear.
Yeah, we need a motion to,
So I move to adopt an ordinance amending the Mill Creek Municipal Code, Titles 14 and 17 relating to fences and accessory buildings.
do I have a second?
Second.
Now open for discussion. Now here's where if you are in favor of the amended version where we are going to move it from 0 feet to 2 feet, then someone needs to make a motion to adopt the amendment sheet 1, right? At this point, if you want to adopt the motion to change it from 0 to the 2 feet. If you want to leave it at the 0 feet, then we don't need to do anything. What do you all?
So we're in discussion right now. We're in discussion.
We are in
So
discussion. Let's discuss.
I jumped I won't say that phrase, actually, I just realized. Because of my comment earlier about that space, that's really where I'm at. And again, I am not a professional. So if you give me looks that are saying like, this is what we need to do, I will happily understand and respect that. But just as someone practical who's had to do this, the setback from a sidewalk to a fence having 2 feet, I know it won't be maintained. And I know and we're talking about areas that potentially some don't have HOAs. And so that's a whole nother thing. And so that's why I'm suggesting that we don't motion to adopt an amendment sheet 1 and we just keep it the work here. I really appreciate everyone's role in this. Also, there's a little bit about like we had a hearing and then I know no one attended, but to then add an amendment to it. So that's why I'm not, I wouldn't vote for an amendment. Pause on my comment.
Okay, Councilmember Paddock.
I guess I have a question. So would the repercussion of someone having a fence that goes all the way to the street and then we get grant funding for sidewalks or just decide we want to build sidewalks, the implication is they take down the fence or we take down the fence to build the sidewalk.
Well, they couldn't build it all the way to the street because they have to, we'd be using the right of way, and so we
Got
have
it.
the property line. So
Ah.
we build up 0 feet from the property line.
Then it would
So-
be like that one house that we saw.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I guess I have a question in this discussion part too, because the way we have worded this, then we are approving both changes. And so I want to make sure that everyone that we discuss the ADUs and that everyone is comfortable with that if we're going to lump that in here. Because I guess I'm struggling to understand, shame on me, I guess, because I'm trying to remember in my head what parcels are over there and what the housing looks like over there. And whether or not we should allow ADUs, we should change it to allow ADUs.
Well, this one, ADUs aren't included in the accessory building code. They have their own section, their own separate thing. So this isn't touching anything with ADUs. It's totally separate.
So he's saying exactly right. So this is a shed or an office or a play building, but it's not an ADU. An ADU has a kitchen and a bathroom sort of thing. So this is the shed that somebody built on the back of their property. I'm not gonna say where it was, that is 2 stories tall and really big and looking over their neighbors. And so that's what we've discovered by this being up to 25 feet tall and 600 square feet and only 5 feet from the back fence. That's what we're trying to address. And so it's gonna make it smaller and lower if it's close to the fence. And if it's close to the house, it could be as big as putting an addition on your house.
And we're extending that to eGov because they don't have that.
So that's
Laid
the
out.
first part of it. Then the second part of it is in eGov, there's a handful of houses where they can't even put in a little shed because eGov doesn't allow accessory buildings because there's no single family houses in eGov, except for the about 6 houses that were there before we declared it to be eGov. Remember, the original intent was we thought all of that was going to be incorporated in eGov, and it was the same area we talked about where the roundabout was going to go through. Those properties got caught in this. And so there's some people who would like to be able to put up a little shed. Right now, they can't put up any shed in their backyard, even though they have lots of space and comply with all the setbacks. It's just not allowed because eGov zoning doesn't allow any kind of accessory buildings. So that's a kind of a second piece of that
Okay.
accessory building thing.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Councilmember Cavallari.
Thank you. I like the idea of shrinking the size. I mean, I think I could see how that would get out of hand without being able to regulate it to some degree and really create an eyesore for someone. Neighbors, the 2-foot thing, I think maybe I'm still a little bit confused on the whole thing. By approving the 2-foot setback, that gives the city the most amount of options going forward though, correct? As opposed to a 0.
The city probably has the same amount of options. It's whether you want, if the sidewalk goes in, do you want there to be a gap between the fence and the sidewalk, or do you want it to be right next to each other? So do we want a 2-foot gap if we build a sidewalk or just no gap?
So I think with the example you laid up there, having the fence go right to the sidewalk looks awful.
Mhm.
And I've seen it up close. I, on that basis, I would prefer the 2-foot. I would prefer the gap regardless of how it's going to be maintained, because I mean, to Councilmember Paddock's comments, the further the fence goes out, it now increases line of sight issues as well. So I mean, I think there's a lot of variables at play here that warrant at least a 2-foot buffer. So I would support the motion with the 2-foot buffer.
Then, Councilmember Cavallari, then, why don't you move to adopt, amendment sheet 1?
Do we need to amend hers then?
Yeah, that's what we have. Yeah, we have to, yeah.
Then on that basis, I know our city attorney is listening in too, so you hear the intent. Gets
Yeah.
6 different confused minds up here.
Yes,
But,
Councilman Cavallari, if you could make the motion as suggested by the Mayor Pro Tem to amend the motion to include the language that is contained in amendment on the amendment sheet 1, that would do it.
Thank you. So on that basis, I'll make the motion to, or I'll make a motion to amend the motion to include the language on sheet 1.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those against?
Against, nay.
Any abstentions? Motion passes. So now, I need to go back and vote. Do we need to do a new motion to vote on the main motion now? Now's
No.
where I'm just confusing myself.
No, you just need to vote on the main motion.
Okay, any further discussion?
On the main motion as amended, I should
Okay,
say,
and
Mayor Pro Tem.
okay, now we can vote on the main motion as amended. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those against?
Nay.
Any abstentions? Motion passes.
That's it. Thank you, council.
Thank you. Now we're moving on to Catch Basin Public Facility Inspection Contract.
Good job,
And
Justin.
that is going to be Frank and Angela Bolson. And I think they may be online.
Yes, I am online and allow me to start my video here. Good evening, everyone. And I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So can everybody see my presentation? Okay,
Yes.
great. Good evening, members of the City Council, city managers and staff and guests. It's been a few weeks since I last appeared before you, and that was to ask for your approval in adopting the most current version of the Stormwater Management Manual for Western Washington. That 1,100-page guidance document provides best management practices, or BMPs, for preventing and limiting the entry of pollutants into surface waters. And these BMPs include maintenance standards. Tonight, I will be asking for you to authorize the approval of a contract to ensure those maintenance standards established for 2 particular pieces of stormwater infrastructure are followed, and the city complies with the associated requirement in its Western Washington Phase 2 municipal stormwater permit. There we go. So this presentation's layout, as you see bulleted here, might look a bit familiar. I have adapted some of the slides used previously, both by myself and by the city engineer, to provide some context for the contract request. So this year marks the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act, which was the enabling legislation that upon which state level regulation is built. Prior to 1987, which was the last update to the CWA, non-point source pollution point source pollution was the focus, and by 1987 it became non-point source pollution or stormwater. And this was actually, if you look at the green text, 4 years after the city began operating its municipal separate sewer system, or MS4, when it incorporated. So following the next couple years, there were actually events that were crucial to the ultimate inaction of the permit as we now know it. But it did take over 20 years, here we are in 2007, since stormwater was added as a regulated entity for the Department of Ecology to provide guidance to Mill Creek and other jurisdictions by issuing both that first Stormwater Management Manual and the first 5-year NPDES permit at the local level, specifically focused on controlling non-point source pollution. So flashing forward, since then, we have had a second permit issued in 2013 following an update to the ecology manual, and we're now approaching the end of the third permit issued in 2019. So each new permit has required changes to city codes, policies, and actions in order to meet new standards. And each time this has mirrored what's been required from phase one entities like Snohomish County or King County or the city of Seattle, which were subject to a lot of these requirements prior to these smaller jurisdictions. So as was noted in previous iterations of this presentation, Mill Creek's compliance with the various elements of the permit, some of which are highlighted here, was negatively impacted by the city's challenging circumstances, including staff shortages exacerbated by the pandemic. And as the city continues to rebuild, it's necessary to use additional methods to address the permit requirements within the timeframes specified by the Department of Ecology. So what we have here with this table is a presentation of the 8 components specified in the current version of the permit. So the green highlights that you see reflect the 3 components that were added in the 2019 permit, and that will be extended in 2025. And there's a lot of detail associated with each of the elements, but I want to draw your attention to where what I'm calling the Hulk hand, the green Hulk hand, is pointing, which is pollution prevention and operation and maintenance for municipal operations. So as you can see, this has been a required element in each of the permits. It's not new, although it keeps getting added to. In addition to this element, to give you a sense of timeline, since I have a column here for 2025, which is the next iteration of the permit, the Department of Ecology has just opened the public comment period for preliminary draft permit reissuance, which will be number 4, and for the stormwater management manual updates. So you can go to the Department of Ecology's website for links to these documents and to submit comments. And the comment period closes December 2nd. So keeping up with this theme of the green Hulk hand, here's some of that extensive detail behind each of these elements. So the important thing to look at here is the hand is directing you to the part of the minimum requirements for addressing operations and maintenance for the city's various activities related to its stormwater system. So I've used red font to highlight the required maintenance for stormwater facilities owned or operated by us. And here's where we are directed to perform inspections annually. You can see this in letter A. And to take appropriate actions per the published maintenance standards. And these maintenance standards include the time we have to complete maintenance once deficiencies have been observed. In item C at the bottom is where we are directed to inspect all catch basins and inlets owned and or operated by us every 2 years. So it's useful to remember the objectives of the stormwater utility and observe that the timelines established for each of these permit elements supports these objectives. Inspections help us to control runoff and manage water pollution by documenting the level of accumulated solids present that may be blocking timely drainage or contributing to the discharge of fine sediment from outfalls to receiving waters, where they can negatively impact water quality and habitat for the benthic macroinvertebrates needed for downstream fish populations. So to give you an idea of what we're dealing with, I've clipped part of our GIS layer showing the locations of the catch basins that need to be inspected. And if it seems to be a sea of purple, there's a reason for that. Noted off to the side, you'll see the total number of catch basins that we need to inspect within 2 years, which totals up to a little over 5,000. So the city's previous and current staffing shortages have either prevented entirely or limited the ability to complete all the work necessary within the time allotted by the permit. Depending upon the location of each catch basin or other stormwater facility, a varying level of traffic control is necessary, and this is in addition to the time needed for examining the asset itself. So that brings us to the point that I essentially just stated, but allow me to reiterate. The city began operating the stormwater system in 1983. And the first permit started in 2007. And subsequent permits have required an inspection and maintenance program, but we haven't done that. I have also noted staffing limits, both past and present. The first bullet point here is not a mistake. The authorization we are seeking will facilitate the first comprehensive citywide inspection of all city-owned catch basins and city-owned stormwater facilities. In order to accomplish this, we developed a scope and requirements, issued them as a request for qualifications, which we then advertised. We reviewed the submittals and have selected the watershed company as the candidate who best meets our requirements. In recognition of our current funds available and the costs that will be associated with inspecting locations along more heavily trafficked routes, we are asking for authorization for a contract not to exceed $147,634 to address the catch basins and stormwater facilities along the lower intensity residential and collector streets. As noted here, staff may return in 2023 to request approval for additional funds to complete inspections for the remaining locations along the heavily trafficked routes, namely the state highways and arterials such as 164th Avenue Southeast. And these would be the ones that require a more significant level of traffic control to meet safety standards and conform to WashDOT requirements. So with that being said, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to present more information associated with Mill Creek Surface Water Utility and Stormwater Program. I am happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Do I have any questions? Councilmember Duque?
I wanted to say to Angela, thank you so much for the amount of work that you've done for this and your whole team. And by whole team, I mean, Frank and Mike, yeah.
Me and Frank, we're the team.
Well, yeah, but you know, this is a lot, and I really appreciate it. And also thinking through the high traffic areas versus not. It's disappointing that this hasn't been handled. And so I'm glad that that we're not allowing what didn't happen before to like not let us continue moving. I had a question, and I think it's more just I think it's more of a PowerPoint display issue. But on page 10 of your PowerPoint, I noticed, and that's the one that has the catch basins, the beautiful purples.
Oh, yes.
So I see different, so is the lighter purple type 1 and then the darker purple type 2 or anything like that, or vice versa, or switch?
No, no, the lighter purple is actually catch basins that are outside our right of way. So just as the city has a responsibility for inspecting and performing maintenance on the catch basins that we own and that are in the public right of way, similarly, catch basins and stormwater facilities that are wholly owned by a homeowners association or a group of developments such as Mill Creek Community Association, they have to exercise their own annual inspection, perform their own annual inspections and submit those records and proof of those inspections to me. So the light purple are for the private entities.
Thank you, because that was my question, because my community, we just signed something for a catch basin renewal. So there's I guess I have two follow-up questions for that one and then a separate question. Where can we see this image, like the public? to find like, because you said it's an overlay, it's with is that a county website where you can?
No, right now, this exists only within our internal GIS.
Okay, only
So-
internal GIS.
So
But-
as part of this process, the goal is to make this map available to the public so they can have an idea of what their MS4 actually looks like and kind of locate themselves along the way. Moreover, we are planning on working with Scott and Jody so that we have an outreach component developed so that as we are planning which locations to address first, that we have sort of an advance notification available so that people aren't blindsided by, well, who are these people working in the street and what are they doing? But because this is a lengthy process, this is going to take a while to accomplish. I don't know that it's necessary. And this is still a decision to be made about when exactly people should be notified that this is going to be happening.
Angela and Councilmember Duque, I apologize, but I need to entertain a motion to extend the meeting real quick, and then we can go back to Councilmember Duque asking questions. Could I have a motion to extend the meeting to 9 o'clock?
And move to extend the meeting till 9 o'clock.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Carry on.
Sorry, apparently I have all the questions from are all in this chair. So I go back to that. Angela, thank you, because you're like 2 steps ahead of me, because that was my follow-up had to do with the outreach component that I saw on a previous slide, because I was curious about that. And I'm so thankful about what you were talking about is how to share this or what that looks like. Because I know for those HOAs, as you mentioned, or communities that have to manage their own catch basins, how helpful it would be to have, to be able to know what they're doing. And then my follow-up question, since that's not available, is you mentioned that those those communities that they then have to manage it and they have to run it by you. Is that a separate component that you're having to handle then on your own to follow up with people that they're doing it? Is that? Because I'm assuming that also that component hasn't been tackled in the years, just like this hasn't, where we're following up with them and saying, did you know you need to do this? And here's what you need to do.
Yes, and this is already somewhat happened. So it's a dialogue that Frank and I both find ourselves having with various homeowners associations. And as you can imagine, because this hasn't been enforced in quite a while, there's varying kinds of responses we get. Some HOAs are on top of it and they want to know what they need to do and they want to understand it clearly and they're all over it. And others keep coming back with more clarifying questions and arguing over, points of whose responsibility. But that's okay. That's all in helping people to understand the community in which they live and how best to ensure its success and take care of it. So that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. I should also say that the method that we'll be using to collect a lot of this information is using in-field data collection devices. So an electronic form that allows us to collect all this information and update it into the spatial database that you see represented with this very purple drawing. So behind all of this is a spreadsheet or a database that all of these inspection results will be recorded in. And we will go through that database and query that to find out which of these catch basins will then come up as meeting the maintenance standard to require cleaning. So that is an entirely separate component of this activity. And so expect to see me again asking for an authorization to contract that service, but we'll get there when we get there.
Councilmember Allison?
Yeah, so this expense would come out of the surface water
Yes.
budget.
So the 147,000 would be coming out of the budget as it stands at this point. And I should be mentioning that. So we receive a biennial grant, capacity grant from the Department of Ecology. And we have not tapped into that grant at all, which is up until now, which is fortunate, because we'll be able to use that 50,000 toward paying for this contract. So there is ample money available to cover this $147,634. And the next phase, if you will, of doing the higher intensity traffic zones will then will be approaching you at a time when the budget will again be sufficient to ask for an authorization.
Any more questions?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. Approve a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with the Watershed Company for the 2022-23 public MS4 catch basin and stormwater facility inspection project in an amount not to exceed $147,634.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Angela. Thank you. Now we will move ahead to the consent agenda. Audit committee members were Mayor Holtzclaw and Councilmember Cavallari. I did fill in today in Mayor Holtzclaw's absence and reviewed all of the bills for him. So do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Do you want me to recite it?
Move to approve the consent
Just
agenda.
move to approve it. Any
Just did.
section?
I just did.
Yeah, oh, do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes. Next on, we are moving on to reports and we will start with staff. City manager?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm going to cover, the first thing I'll cover is I'll just combine Q3 accomplishments, and a lot of those things that we've done are carrying over in the Q4 as well. So I'm just going to combine things, have an idea kind of where I'm going, what we've done so far. We've gone through 3 quarters in 2022, and we've accomplished a lot. We have two months left remaining this year, and there's still a lot of things to do and prepare for the following year as well. What I can say is once we finish with 2022, we'll have a really good idea of the full cycle and what we've accomplished so far. And then we can go back and reevaluate what's been done. As you recall, many of our staff members are new, whether it's the past year, 2 years. And so we're having to reinvent a lot of things that have been done in the past. And it's challenging, but we're doing a lot to improve the city. We've taken a pretty basic strategy in how we move forward in the past year on things that we really need to address. Just focusing on core operations, SOPs where we could in our workflow. It's been a good journey. I think what we'll do for next year is we'll get the leadership team together, put together a strategic plan that goes further out, probably 3 to 5 years, and we'll do that internally. Some of the key things on the hiring side, which was a big part of our plan, was trying to fill our budget positions. So we're still working on that right now. One key area is the chief of police position. As you all know, we will have a committee engagement event at 5:30 on this Thursday. And that will give the community an opportunity to meet our candidates and have a Q&A. We reached out to a lot of our organizations as well. So it's on social right now. The following day, on the 28th, is when we will have panel interviews by our leadership team. They will be interviewing the finalists, and at the same time, I'll be having one-on-ones as well. A decision will be made earliest on Friday, latest probably early next week. We have a finance director position that's open. We'll be going through the first round of interviews mid-November, I think 9th and 10th, somewhere around that, after that first week. So hoping to have a finance director on site maybe close to the end of November, beginning of December. Other positions that we have open, are Public Works Maintenance Operations Manager, the project engineer in Public Works as well, we've mentioned before, and also the planning manager position. We're currently working with our acting HR director to find a way on how to improve the process a bit and maybe figure out why these positions are not being filled. They could be, I think the job market's pretty tough out there, and it's pretty tough on the planning and engineering side. That's probably a big part of it, but we're still going to see if we can still try to get more applicants coming in to really figure out why we're not as competitive. COVID-19. As you know, we updated our COVID-19 policy. We still want to be a little careful going into the fall season here with I think it's called RVP, and we have COVID still. There are cases out there as well as the flu. So we just want to be cognizant of kind of what's out there, and we're still monitoring Snohomish County and their case counts and hospitalizations to make sure that we're just on top of that as well. We're continuing to strengthen our relationships with a lot of our organizations and partners. So I've met and I'll be meeting with all these that I'm going to be mentioning on a quarterly basis, just to give an update, kind of where the city's at. A similar update to what I'm giving you now. Some of the groups that and the organizations that I've met with so far, and I will continue meeting with the Rotary Club, Chamber, MCCA, Tim Panels at the Panels Group here on this end of Town Center. I'm still working on finding out the group that owns the north of the UW bookstore that used to be there. And so I have a list of owners I need to reach out to them. Haven't reached out yet, but specifically those meetings are going to entail just giving them, again, it's just an update, but I kind of really want to figure out a way that we can work with them and going forward on Town Center. And there's other properties as well that they own across the city of Mill Creek. Economic Alliance is another organization, as well as meeting with the boards and commissions, or the city of Mill Creek boards and commissions on a quarterly basis. So those are the key ones right now. And then as I move forward, I'll figure out other organizations that we need to continue partnering with. You're all aware of the budget planning process and development process. We're hoping to nail that down here probably early December. We're working on that really hard. Hopefully we won't have any more changes, but if we do, we'll bring you up to speed on those in the coming weeks. We've talked a bit about ARPA. I think everyone's aware of kind of the challenges that we're having balancing the budget, and it's really challenging. So we're revisiting kind of how we want to move forward, which will be one of our key priorities on our strategic plan next year is finances, is making sure that we're very prudent on how we move forward and how we use funding or how we find funding sources in various areas. And I think we need to explore a lot of things we've already talked about, whether it's grant, ARPA and other things, and really kind of dive down into what's our priorities are, both from a high level and really from an operational standpoint as well. Economic development is another big priority that the council had from 2022. We've met with the Economic Alliance and we'll probably have them in council in the next month or so, just to provide you with an update on kind of what the leadership team is thinking about in terms of moving forward within the Economic Development Committee. They're going to help guide us in developing a committee, and as well as explaining on how we can incorporate a lot of things that we are working on now from a development standpoint and from a retail business standpoint, incorporating what we're doing on the comp plan, the DRCC, discussions regarding our 2044 requirement to increase population and so forth. So they're going to help us incorporate a lot of these different areas into that plan. Farm lease. We're working on the farm lease right now to execute that agreement between the Vintage and the City of Mill Creek. Working on parking spaces. There's a lot of challenging issues with the 24-hour parking spaces within the farm, but we're working with the Vintage right now to figure out how we can resolve those individuals that are parking on the street in those areas over that 24-hour limit. There have been changes, which we will update probably in the coming weeks. We should probably give you a full update on kind of the changes that occurred with the farm. The hotel, and I want to make sure we're transparent that the hotel is no longer going to be built. And so we'll provide you like a presentation on kind of where we're going with this right now. And if you have questions, we can answer those. I can answer those today as well. Substation at the farm as well. Acting Chief White took a drive out there and nothing's started yet. We need to get the permitting process to the Vintage to make sure that, and we want to make sure we address certain other requirements too before we get that going. But looks like probably in 2023 is when that substation will be built out after they start doing the TI, or not the TI, but the actual build out of what now is going to be retail on that level, first level on building F. Fire annexation. So I'm sure many of you have questions about the apparatus. South County Fire has secured an engine, so they will be moving forward. There will be no disruptions in service, so we can ensure that our community that everything's going to move smoothly on that end. They will ensure that they will ensure that will happen. Real estate transaction, that's going to occur as well in the coming months. We'll have to get that nailed down before the end of the year as well. Phase 1 inspection is going to start soon, if it hasn't already. The site inspection, fire marshal service as well. So all those things we'll be working on in the coming months, and it's getting close. We'll be working on a strategic communications plan. Hopefully get that started. Just given capacity issues, it's been challenging, but we'll hopefully get some meetings together at a retreat internally to where we can work on an overall plan, how we communicate externally and within internally across all of our departments as well. Next week you'll see a we'll request the approval of the planning consultant that we've hired, Bruce Dees, for the DRCC planning. So you'll see that come through next week. Legislative priorities also, we'll be bringing the council legislative committee together. I have Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Steckler, and I think it's Councilmember Allison. And so we'll bring that committee together and then start the process as well with that, and start meeting with our electeds at the state level. And then finally, the Veterans Day parade's coming up on the 11th. That is been planned out thanks to our Marcom department, and so we're ready to go on that, and you'll hear more about that in the coming weeks. City Chats on November 16th as well, so that's something we'll need to plan for. Many of these items I've already mentioned are covered in some sort of fashion across the council priorities for 2022 and those priorities that council set for the city manager. We have not accomplished a lot of these, but we are moving forward in addressing every one of those priorities in some way. It's just the capacity issues that are keeping us from actually accomplishing things, but we're moving forward on everything. And with that, and then I'll take any questions with that. No, on any of those, anything.
I think there are no questions.
So we have one more update by our chief. I wanted to provide you an update on the staffing on the police side. So I'll hand it over to Acting Chief White.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Council. I'm excited to tell you that we are really close to filling all the vacancies in the police department. Over the last 10 months, we've gone over 68 applications, candidates that have come into the police department, and we've filled several vacancies that were there. We are down to 3 commissioned vacancies and 1 support services vacancy. That being said, we actually have candidates for all of those positions selected. In the support services position, we have a contingent offer that has been accepted for that position. That individual should be starting January 3rd based on her leaving her current job. And then in the commission side of the house, we have 2 individuals that have signed their letters of contingency with the police department. Those individuals have passed the majority of their processing. They have 2 steps in the process left to complete, and we expect them to be brought on January 3rd as well. The reason they're being brought on January 3rd is academy dates. We just don't know exactly when they will be. The academy dates for the rest of this year are full. So we're looking towards 2023. And the final position in the police department is actually a possibility of a lateral candidate coming in from Texas. So we're very excited about that as well. He will be in town first week in November, and we will get him. He's very anxious to look at the department and complete his testing process. That's going to be very rapid. He will complete his entire testing process within a week, based on the fact that he has to get back home to Texas. So we're very excited. We have, individuals selected for every position in the police department. We should be up to full staff by the first week of January. Any questions?
Great news.
Yeah, great news. Anybody have any questions? Thank you, Chief. Anybody else, Martin?
There we go, Mayor Pro Tem, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to council reports. I have just a couple things. I want to let everyone know that tomorrow night, I will be at the SCT meeting, the Snohomish County tomorrow, in place of Mayor Holtzclaw because he's on vacation and I'm the alternate. I do want to let you all know that one of the things that I'm going to bring up in that meetings, we are discussing the allocation for housing. And I know Clay White had mentioned when he was here giving us a presentation, I don't know if you remember, about the housing needing to meet all income levels. And I'd asked, what is that going to look like? Well, there's a little bit of discussion about what that's going to look like, but not enough discussion perhaps of what that's going to look like. So I plan on bringing up in that meeting tomorrow a request that they bring this to all the city councils and all the council members rather than just having the steering committee looking at this, because I think it's extremely important that everyone is aware of what's going on and that all the cities are able to look at their resources and understand the impacts on them. So I just wanted all of you to know that I will be doing that and I will report back next week on the outcome of that request that I'm going to put out tomorrow. So I just wanted to make sure you all knew. And then also I just wanted to check the city chat with the mayor. I think we're doing that on site this time, right?
That is
Mark?
correct. I'm
Okay.
speaking for Marcom, but since we did it last time, in person, it'll happen again probably.
Okay, I just wanted, I just wanted to be, I thought we had a location for that, but perhaps more details on that next week. So I just wanted to go over that and then thank you, Martin, for going over the legislative agenda committee is going to get together. We plan on having our legislative agenda put together and brought to you so that we can actually have a conversation with our representatives in December before they head out to Olympia for the next section, so that we'll be on top of that. And that's all I've got tonight. So I will start down the line. So Councilmember Paddock, do you have any reports?
Just one. So I sat in on the last week's restart of the Chamber of Commerce, weekly Chamber of Commerce meetings. And it was really good. There were quite a few representatives of their local companies and they did their meet and greet and had a really lively discussion of the events actually that are happening in the city. And Director Jeff Ritter was really eager to be able to partner with the city, certainly on events that are happening here in the town center. But also wants to look to kind of expand coverage, if you will, outside of the town center so that other parts of the community are more engaged, if you will. The businesses are more engaged in what we're doing. He's already been talking to our comms team, Scott and Jody, huge fan of the work that they're doing and was eager to collaborate further. And then tomorrow, based on that discussion, tomorrow, I think it's it's the Snohomish Economic Council. They're having a small business incubator collaboration over at the Linwood, what's that? Convention Center. Thank you very much. Way past my bedtime. And a bunch of those same folks are going to be getting together at that facility to again kind of share their wares and talk a little bit about what can be done and bringing those businesses or some of that business into Mill Creek. It was kind of exciting. It was a fun group. And I think they would all be happy to see all of our faces.
Thank you. Councilmember Cavallari.
Thanks. More of a personal note and maybe more of a community informative note. Whether you may or may not know, Hoquiam Washington State Representative from Hoquiam, Representative James Walsh, lost his wife yesterday in a head-on collision with a logging truck down along the coast. And so I bring that up because we're getting in that wet season now and people are in a hurry. Cars are going fast, trucks are going fast, and truck versus car, truck always wins. And unfortunately, there's a loss of life. And so my only comment to say here is remind people that you love them and drive careful. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Allison.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, a few of us were able to attend the South County Fire open house and see all their apparatus and also understand their community outreach. It's really substantial. And I feel really good that we're going to be part of that community. It was impressive. I also was able to attend a Leadership Snohomish County breakfast last Friday morning where they handed out awards. And one organization in particular, the gentleman's name is Jason Cockburn, and he heads up a nonprofit called the Second Chance Foundation. Really struck my heart. It's for people in recovery and helping them re-enter society and be contributing members of society again. And he's been really successful. He's in recovery himself. And yeah, any support to that organization, I think, is a very valuable one. But it was a good opportunity to see what some of these good nonprofits are doing in our county. So appreciate being able to represent the city at that function. And that's all.
Councilmember Duquesne.
I just wanted to wish anyone who celebrates a happy Diwali. I had some neighbors who dropped off some sweets. And so it's now one of my favorites. But also, because Halloween's coming up and that is my #1 favorite. But anyways, happy Diwali to anyone who celebrates.
Thank you, Councilmember Duque. We're kind of really close to 9. Do I need to extend again before we go to comments, or do you think we're okay? Okay. I'd like to entertain a motion to extend to 9:05.
I move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
I abstain.
Does not want to extend. Thank you. So with that, we will move on to public comment on items on the agenda or not on the agenda. So first up in the room, I have Barb Heidel. Barb, if you will come up and name and address in 3 minutes.
Barb Heidel, 1401, 144th Place, Southeast Mill Creek. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. As Will Nelson has mentioned, there are a few of us in the public who would appreciate having access to presentations prior to the meeting. It's very important for us that are so involved in listening and trying to see. Along with that, when presentations are put up, for those in the audience, it would be helpful to enlarge any charts or spreadsheets that have numbers on them so they can be seen, especially the budget sheets. It would be, especially if the information is not available ahead of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Would anyone else like to speak? Nope. All right. With that, I guess I was fine. And I've moved to adjourn at 8:56 PM.
Second.
Without any, hearing no objection, meeting is adjourned.